Over the past decade, Utah has emerged as one of the most closely watched real estate markets in the United States. Rapid population growth, sustained job creation, and an expanding technology sector have reshaped development patterns across the state. Within that environment, entrepreneurs have tested new approaches to land use, housing density, and community design. The phrase Micah Pilkey Utah increasingly appears in conversations about developers who built early experience in the state's competitive market and later expanded their thinking across the broader Mountain West. Utah's transformation has been dramatic. The state's population has grown from roughly 2.9 million residents in the mid-2010s to well over 3.4 million today, placing sustained pressure on housing supply. Cities along the Wasatch Front, including Salt Lake City, Provo, and Ogden, have seen demand rise faster than construction in several cycles, pushing home prices higher and accelerating interest in alternative housing models. Developers working in Utah during this period had to adapt quickly. Traditional suburban subdivision strategies gave way to higher density housing, mixed-use projects, and modular construction methods designed to shorten development timelines. At the same time, investors and planners began exploring creative land reuse opportunities, from infill redevelopment to the conversion of underutilized properties into housing. In that environment, Utah real estate developer Micah Pilkey represents one example of the entrepreneurial mobility that has defined the region's real estate sector. Like many developers who began their careers in Utah, he entered the industry at a time when rising demand forced builders to rethink conventional approaches to housing development. The Mountain West has become a proving ground for new housing concepts, particularly those aimed at addressing affordability challenges. Developers have experimented with micro-housing, modular construction, and compact community design as land and labor costs increased. Developers like Micah Pilkey Utah, based in earlier years, have adapted to shifting market demands by exploring ways to deliver housing more efficiently while still creating stable, livable communities. Rather than focusing solely on large single-family developments, many entrepreneurs began evaluating underutilized property types that could be repurposed for residential use. For Pilkey, that approach led to projects centered on transforming existing RV and mobile home parks into organized tiny home communities, an emerging niche that combines relatively low development costs with growing consumer interest in smaller, more flexible living spaces. The concept reflects a broader trend in Western real estate development. As housing shortages intensified across fast-growing states such as Utah, Arizona, Idaho, and Nevada, developers increasingly explored housing models that could be delivered faster than traditional subdivisions. Tiny homes, modular units, and prefabricated structures became part of a growing toolkit. These models appealed to several market segments simultaneously. Young professionals priced out of conventional housing markets often view compact homes as an entry point to ownership. Retirees and remote workers, meanwhile, are drawn to simplified living arrangements that reduce both cost and maintenance. The rise of these alternatives also reflects a shift in how developers think about land. Rather than focusing solely on raw land acquisition and subdivision, many projects now involve reimagining existing spaces and infrastructure. RV parks, aging manufactured housing sites, and surplus land near urban centers are increasingly viewed as opportunities for redevelopment. Within this context, Micah Pilkey real estate projects illustrate how developers can blend entrepreneurial strategy with housing innovation. By focusing on smaller-scale community design, such projects attempt to bridge the gap between affordability and livability, two priorities that frequently collide in high-growth states. To understand why developers have pursued alternative solutions, it helps to examine Utah's housing trajectory over the past decade. The state has consistently ranked among the fastest-growing in the country. Economic expansion fueled by technology firms, logistics companies, and outdoor recreation industries has attracted both workers and investors. The so-called Silicon Slopes technology corridor has drawn national attention, bringing new businesses and talent into the region. Population growth has followed. In many counties along the Wasatch Front, the number of residents has expanded far faster than available housing inventory. Economists and housing analysts frequently note that the state has faced a structural housing deficit for several years. As a result, home prices climbed sharply throughout the late 2010s and early 2020s. Median home values in several metropolitan areas more than doubled during the decade. While the pace of growth has moderated in recent years, the underlying supply challenge remains. Developers responded in several ways. First, density increased. Multifamily housing construction rose significantly, particularly near transit corridors and employment centers. Second, municipalities began revising zoning policies to allow accessory dwelling units and other flexible housing types. Third, and perhaps most interesting from an industry perspective, developers began experimenting with entirely new housing categories. Tiny homes and modular units became part of that conversation. These structures typically require less land per unit and can be produced more quickly than traditional housing. For developers navigating rising construction costs and regulatory hurdles, the approach offers both speed and cost advantages. This is the space where Micah Pilkey developer initiatives have intersected with broader industry trends. Utah has long functioned as a launchpad for regional developers. The state's dynamic growth environment allows entrepreneurs to test business models before expanding into neighboring markets. Over the past decade, several developers who began in Utah have gone on to pursue projects throughout the Mountain West. States such as Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, and Nevada share many of the same demographic trends: population inflows, limited housing supply, and strong economic growth. As a result, strategies that proved successful in Utah often translate well to other Western markets. Entrepreneurs in the sector frequently describe the region as a development laboratory, where regulatory frameworks and market demand encourage experimentation. Smaller cities and suburban areas provide opportunities to pilot unconventional housing concepts before they scale. Developers like Micah Pilkey, real estate entrepreneur, have participated in that broader movement of geographic and strategic expansion. Projects that begin in Utah's housing ecosystem often inform future development efforts elsewhere in the region. In this sense, Pilkey's work reflects a pattern common among Mountain West developers: start in a fast-growing state, develop specialized expertise, and then apply those lessons across multiple markets. Housing affordability has become one of the defining policy and economic issues across the western United States. Local governments, investors, and developers increasingly recognize that traditional construction alone cannot close the supply gap. That recognition has encouraged new partnerships and creative development strategies. Some municipalities have begun working directly with developers to repurpose underutilized land for housing. Others are experimenting with public-private partnerships that allow faster deployment of modular or prefabricated homes. Investors, meanwhile, have taken a greater interest in niche real estate asset classes. Tiny home communities, build-to-rent developments, and modular housing networks are attracting attention as scalable models. In this evolving landscape, Micah Pilkey housing projects highlight the kind of adaptive thinking becoming more common in Western real estate. Instead of focusing exclusively on traditional subdivision development, entrepreneurs are exploring hybrid approaches that combine community design, affordability goals, and new construction technologies. The concept of small footprint communities has gained particular traction. These developments typically cluster compact homes around shared amenities such as green space, walking paths, or community buildings. The model reduces infrastructure costs while preserving elements of neighborhood design. For residents, the appeal lies in lower entry prices and simplified living. For developers, the advantage is speed. Projects can often move from concept to completion faster than conventional housing developments. The Mountain West remains one of the most dynamic development regions in the United States. Strong population growth, economic diversification, and shifting housing preferences will continue to reshape the real estate landscape. Utah, in particular, is likely to remain a central hub for experimentation. State and local leaders have increasingly acknowledged the need for innovative housing strategies, creating an environment where developers can test new models. Entrepreneurs operating in the region are responding accordingly. Some are focusing on modular housing production. Others are experimenting with mixed-income communities or alternative ownership structures designed to expand affordability. Within that broader transformation, Micah Pilkey Utah real estate developer stands among the group of industry participants exploring unconventional development strategies. His work around tiny home communities illustrates one potential path forward in a housing market defined by both opportunity and constraint. As the Mountain West continues to grow, the role of entrepreneurial developers will likely remain central. The region's housing challenges require both capital and creativity, qualities that have historically defined many of the builders who began their careers in Utah's fast-moving real estate environment. The next decade of development in the Mountain West will almost certainly include new housing types, new construction technologies, and new models of community design. Developers who adapt to those shifts will shape the future of the region's housing landscape, just as earlier innovators helped transform Utah's real estate market over the past 10 years.